Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CPO series, where our world-class chief product officers come to share their firsthand experiences in building products, building companies, and perfecting their craft. So I'm Christina here from the Dragonboat team today as your host, and I am joined with Ryan Polk, our special CPO series guest speaker. So, to kick us off, if you're here now, we'd love to hear from you. Say hello, introduce yourself. You can use the Zoom chat and let us know where you're joining from. And as we're kind of meeting and greeting, I'm going to go over just a quick few housekeeping notes. So, the first is that this is about a half-hour session. It will be recorded and available on demand later with our other CPO series webinars. And then if you have questions for Ryan during the presentation, you can submit those. We'll either take them live or we will have a dedicated Q&A at the end. So let us know all your burning questions. And now to kind of officially start, the reason you're here is because of the CPO series, which is hosted by Dragonboat. And in case you didn't know, just a quick word, Dragonboat enables product leaders to accelerate outcomes with a suite of products for road mapping, portfolio management, and strategic planning. So check out dragonboat.io/CPO to learn more. And my friend Anna will be helping us drop some links to the resources I'm mentioning today. So be on the lookout for that in the chat. And now, without further ado, I am delighted to officially introduce our speaker, Ryan. It's really great to have Ryan back on our CPO series. When we first started this series in 2022, Ryan was one of our OG guest speakers. So super awesome to have him back and to hear what he has to share today on choosing the right road mapping tool. So a little bit of context before we dive into the talk on, kind of why Ryan is speaking to this today. So Ryan is the new CPO of Stack Overflow, and one of the key focus areas for Ryan as he started this role is to help build an effective outcome-driven product organization to really help accelerate the business. So in order to do this, he needed to up-level his tooling, spreadsheets, decks, and Jira just really were not cutting it. So he went on a tooling search that really would enable him as a product leader, enable his team, and enable his company to be effective in leading product and driving the business forward. So as part of that process, he shared his tooling requirements that really needed to address the needs of the modern day product organization. So he actually had his product ops to kind of lead this charge to do a fair assessment of all the options in the market. And after a pretty rigorous process, they ended up choosing Dragonboat as their road mapping tool. So a few weeks in, Ryan can already kind of see this and achieve unparalleled visibility and strategic alignment across the portfolio. So really today, as part of that, Ryan is going to be sharing what he looks for and the needs in a roadmap tool based on his decades of experience as a CPO. He's hired and coached CPOs as well, and he's also helped build previous toolings for R&D teams. So you are all in very great hands to hear from an expert. So Ryan, let me go ahead and just pass the mic to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'll walk through just a little bit of my history as well, just to give a little bit more relevance to this conversation. It's great to see everybody on here. We've got folks from all over the place. Lots of folks from Boston. Was there for a number of years with Carbon Black. Good to see the Boston folks on here, and a lot of folks internationally, Brazil, Portugal, Rome. That's awesome. My history, I started off in engineering 30 years ago almost. Worked my way through the ranks as an engineer and eventually shifted gears to run product management with Rally Software. And Rally in the day was the agile company, and we were working on moving up market to help people build more of a portfolio style capability into their agile teams and how they were working. And this was 15 or so years ago. Shifted as the leader of a whole portfolio at CA when they bought Rally, and we had the whole portfolio. So we had the Rally product, we had the Clarity product, and we were their Agile Technologies business unit, along with some service management products as well. Was the CPTO at Carbon Black, running both product and engineering. And we scaled that business from just over 100 million to almost 400 million in revenue over 3 years, and sold to VMware in 2019. Portion of my role over the last 3 years, I joined Insight Partners and helped them build their practice around product and technology. What's interesting here is I hired probably several hundred CPOs into their roles as part of that role, advising companies on the hiring here. And so I can walk through kind of the dynamics. And what's interesting here is now I've jumped back into the real world with Stack Overflow, and I wanted to kind of walk through the challenges that we're seeing and the challenges that Dragonboat is helping us solve. And this is kind of a primer for anyone who is a CPO, is a new CPO, or is jumping into this role. Like, how do you quickly solve the problems that you're seeing without struggling with them for too long in your new role? And lots of people go into that learning mode when they join a company. But I do want to encourage people to, in some ways, think about Dragonboat as a way to accelerate learning mode when you take on a new CPO role, as you're kind of walking through it. And I'll kind of talk you through that as we talk about Carbon Black. You can go ahead and the next slide. Actually, the next one as well. As we're thinking about those pain points, well, I stepped in the door to Stack Overflow about 5 months ago. And as we look at the organization, there's been a lot of change in the last year for Stack, right? We've got some elements of disruption coming in from the introduction of AI tools, and we had to kind of shift our position in the market and reposition the organization as a whole. The company had been missing a CPO for about 9 months before I joined, and the previous CPO seemed to have a lot of good systems in place, but they had kind of deteriorated before I got here. Along with the fact that we shifted priorities and the CEO was stepping in as that CPO role. And so I had to kind of sit down and say, all right, how do we get things realigned? One of the core areas, we had strategies at the top level of the business, and we had the teams working on their specific implementations of features at the bottom level of the business. There really wasn't a lot of cohesive connection between what were we doing at the top and what were we doing at the bottom, right? There was the missing layers. Now, some of that is as simple as a basic work breakdown structure, right? Creating structures in between those strategic levels, whether or not you're doing OKRs or you're doing some other form of planning. You need to have basic structures in between. So we established a simple work breakdown structure, initiatives, features. We kept the epics that the teams were working on in Jira, and then of course the tasks underneath that. Right? And really, that is also what was clear was that the outcomes that we were looking to focus on weren't really connected to the roadmap in any way, shape, or form. So think of this as we were looking to drive a increase in GRR in our enterprise products, right? Well, we had a lot of items on the roadmap that we believed would do that, but there was no real connection back to any kind of overall outcome in a system. We had the teams working in Jira. We had roadmaps that were kind of a split between spreadsheets and Google slide presentations. And in the end, we had a whole set of business goals that we were looking to achieve that were only loosely defined by what the teams were working on. And when we're looking for empowered teams, we of course want to keep those teams in the engineering level aligned. We want to keep them focused on a specific area, and we want to keep them with a certain level of autonomy, but that autonomy needs to be connected back to what we're delivering and what our outcomes are as a business, right? I wouldn't just say we were missing roadmap commitments. We didn't even know we were making them in the first place, right? And so when you look at the overall alignment of our roadmap, there were a lot of features, functionality, things that we were doing that weren't necessarily aligned with the overall goals of the business. But also there were a bunch of items that just weren't connected to the work we were doing. And there were a lot of dependencies between teams that were being dropped or weren't necessarily being aligned, and so that was delaying our ability to deliver over time. And those limited commitments, well, when I think about limited commitments, I think about it as um, we have not enough information to make good commitments on a quarterly basis. And that's one of the areas that I focus on when taking on a new team, is creating a couple of simple structures: a basic work breakdown structure, and then also creating some form of quarterly cadence across the business so that we can start to figure out what are we committing to inside of a small but large enough window, like a quarter, to start to align the business around making commitments. We also had kind of a focus on shifting people around to the work. And so it was very difficult to allocate trade-offs across different areas of the business, because we had so many people shifting between teams. And so not only were we not able to look at the actual work itself, we also weren't able to see the capacity of the organization in an effective way. And so we had to focus in on creating consistent and persistent teams, and then use the systems that we implemented to help us allocate work to those persistent teams. That is one of the core elements. We'll talk about it here in a minute. And then overall, it was really hard, and it is still hard, but we are working through this, as we've implemented Dragonboat, to measure the impact of changes on our product and how our product is performing both in the market and how our organization is performing on building our product, right? It's still very hard to measure those things, but that's actually something that has become far easier with Dragonboat put into place. We've got a long road to go from changing our practices, getting more consistent in our delivery, a lot of the things that we have to focus on around building an organization. But visibility into this area is key, and it's helping us evolve quickly. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. So as we talk about Dragonboat, right, looking at a couple of key views. Of course, this isn't my view. My view is a little bit different. Couldn't put our actual roadmap up here, but as we look at the different levels here, right, we've got at the top here a view of a strategy, or something that you might call it there's a bunch of different names for this, but the top level item, I call them strategies or mother strategies or something along those lines. Below that, we typically have an initiative. That's how we've structured it. And in fact, this is aligned with our structure. And then below that, we have our features that are aligned to teams, meaning that one team can handle one or more features. And typically we try and schedule features into a quarterly time box, as you can see in the third column here. The ability to see progress is really cool. The ability to actually track all of our core items that we're working on at any one point in time and roll them up to the overall strategies, which are aligned in our world to our business objectives. So you think of it as each strategy kind of result is aligned with an OKR. And we've got this overall breakdown where I can see all of the work that is aligned underneath that and see what products it's impacting, what areas of the product it might be impacting, and how that aligns to the time frame. Usually for us, we do 1 to 3 quarters. We're looking at the next 3 quarters with the idea that our initiatives shouldn't span past about a 3-quarter window. So this is a great view. This is kind of the penultimate view that I use on a daily basis to see across my organization what's going on without having to pester people on a daily basis. I can dig into each one of these. I can see the capabilities. I can link over to Jira if I need to and see the actual tasks. But typically, at a CPO level, I'm usually sitting here. I hardly ever end up in Jira. And to be blunt, our Jira instance is crazy. Like, if you're not on an individual team, I can't make hide nor hair of it, right? I go into Jira and get lost pretty quickly. Now, my product managers who are on, working with individual teams, understand their backlogs, understand what they're doing, and the linkages back to our features here and our initiatives and our strategies is what's important for them to maintain. But once they've got that maintained, I can see, all of this at a high level, and I can start to talk to the executive team about what we're doing and what trade-offs we need to make in the roadmap. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, this is a great view, by the way, and it's more than just ROI. So there's a bunch of different views. I had an old product manager who was I think he had a master's or PhD in statistics, and he always argued with me that pie charts were horrible. He hated pie charts. I thought it was such a funny thing to have a disdain for, but I love pie charts. And I love them for many reasons, but when it comes down to it at the top level, being a product management leader, understanding the pie chart allocation of what you're focusing on across your R&D organizations, and our R&D organization is incredibly important, right? So being able to see what are we focusing on? What is our primary spend category? And then how do we align that back to the benefit, right? You can't do ROI unless you understand both, your theoretical benefit for the things you're working on, the idea of the return or your hypothesis on the return versus how much you're actually spending on the things that you're working on is incredibly important, right? So being able to then calculate that ROI. One of the things that I encourage new CPOs to do is immediately create this view just based off of default categories, whatever you might have for a basic category for work in Jira. It might just be a tag for maintenance work versus new product development versus architecture work or something along those lines. But create a pie chart view so you can see how much you're spending across the board. Because when you tell your CEO that 70% of your roadmap is dedicated to some big initiative that you've got to get over the line. But then when you actually run this analysis and realize that 50% of your roadmap's actually dedicated to defects, another 20% of your roadmap's dedicated to maintenance and tech debt, and really you've only got 30% of the roadmap for new product development. And oh, by the way, you're only getting 70% of that. I can't even do the math on that, but I think that means you're doing 21% of your actual overall allocation towards this big new effort that you've got to get done, right? So understanding how this lays out and having a good perspective on the benefit, the hypothetical benefit of the features that you're delivering versus the capacity of the organization and how much you're spending in each category is absolutely key to changing the perspective of how product is done at a portfolio level inside of your organization. It's something that you as a new CPO have to have a strong grasp of, because as you're making commitments at the top level to the executive team, you need to make it very, very clear that there are other costs of doing business, especially in SaaS products, other than just the new product development that everybody's super excited about. So this is a great view, a great way of managing that. Go ahead into the next one. In the end, as the CPO, you typically end up being kind of like the executive team cat herder, right? Your job is to keep everybody aligned around what are the priorities, what are your strategic priorities as a business, and how are you making progress against those strategic priorities as a business. And this lines up with, of course, the key capabilities of Dragonboat. But when you think about what you're doing on a weekly basis inside of the, whatever you call them, the ELT or SLT or executive team meetings, right? Is really you're there to keep everybody on task, everybody focused on the new things that you're delivering, everybody focused on the new value that the business is going to be driving, along with the previous value that they did drive, and how are those things expressed inside of their actual go-to-market motions post delivery, right? And so having a good focus on at this strategy level and being able to show this in an executive dashboard is incredibly powerful. And so I use these on a regular basis to kind of, as I'm doing status with the executive team, here we are with this, here we are with that, and keeping it at a high level object, that strategy object that they can understand and they can manipulate without necessarily having to dive down all the way to the feature level, inside of the teams. let's keep going here. Want to leave enough time for questions and so forth. Um, when we think about aligning with your actual delivery, um, you need to be able to roll up your commitments, and I do commitments on a quarterly basis, right? So I say inside of the quarter, we have this number of teams, and this number of teams committed to this number of features overall, right? I'm looking to then be able to see what features are on track, what features are at risk, which features are off track, and at the end of the quarter, I need to be able to say essentially this is our say-do ratio. This is how many features we said we were going to do. This is how many features we actually completed. And then there's some, of course, trade-off back and forth as to new work coming in and old work being deprioritized inside of the quarter as well. This is a great view for us to be able to see, what is currently planned, what is the status of those items, and really give me a preview of whether or not we're actually going to hit all the items we committed to inside of the quarter. And it also allows me to jump in and say, what items do I need to focus on, either clearing impediments or helping the teams do something, or deprioritizing because the work blew up on us and it was way more work than we thought. Like, what are the off track items, and how do I focus in on helping people make sure that those are good. In fact, I see a win every time I can take one of those off track items and pause it or close it as we're not going to do it. Because at the very least, I now know that, an item that we thought was going to be valuable became well more difficult than we thought it was going to be. And instead of sitting there and just churning on it and using up time, we make the quick decision to pause it or to close it and say, we're not actually going to do this because it doesn't match our original ROI estimate, and it's not worth the effort. That is a far better decision to be made than to just continue to try and churn on something and constantly have it in the yellow at risk category overall. So try and focus on killing things faster. Killing things faster makes more room for you to do the things that you you can complete. We'll keep going here. Wrapping it all up. First things first, if you're a new CPO, I've made this mistake multiple times. This time I was faster at implementing Dragonboat, but don't put off tooling. You can come in with all of your different templates and spreadsheets and all this other stuff. And if you get your team into those things, yes, you can quickly solve some of your problems. But the problem being, then you have a whole team dependent on these spreadsheets and Google Slides and all this other stuff that then ends up being kind of a crutch that makes it harder to move tools. One of the first things I would do as a new CPO at this point, and I did do as part of Stack, is bring folks in quickly. The Dragonboat team can come in, they can help you understand your environment, they can help you get set up and start to get views into what is currently going on, right? What the mess inside of Jira is what I would call it. And so getting the right tool in place quickly as you come in the door shortens your learning cycle and allows you to become that leader quickly inside of the organization and start to become that cat herder. Drive the executive team to make the right decisions, and the tooling is incredibly important for that. Having the right tool to cover all aspects of how you plan, how you manage your quarterly increments if you're doing some kind of quarterly system. How do you basically create that integrated view of what you're working on across the organization, and how do you communicate that to the executive team, right? You should be able to use the same product, the same capabilities, Dragonboat supports this, to communicate to your executive team around what you're working on. You should have those views to be able to manage that team effectively through views through the product, and be able to communicate with your product teams and your revenue teams around what are you working on, what are you taking to market, and when, and what is the success or failure of those efforts. And having the right tool is incredibly important for that. Think about this as like one of the first steps you'll do as your discovery process as a new CPO, and then grow from there instead of letting the old systems and the old capabilities sit in place for too long, and your team gets used to them. So with that, I'm going to stop talking because I've been talking for a little while. Um, love to open this up for questions, and answer anything that you'd like to ask.
All right, thank you, Ryan. We've got a couple questions coming in, but before we kind of finalize with Q&A today, it is so important and enriching the insights that you're sharing, Ryan. So thank you for, sharing all these learnings and advice. Can really make or break a product leader's success in so many ways. So like someone said in the audience, so many gems today. So thank you for that. And one last thing, if you want to get in touch with Ryan, if you really resonated with the conversation today, connect with him on LinkedIn. We have his LinkedIn profile here for you. And Anna's also going to be dropping these in the chat. And then if you're interested in learning more about Dragonboat, how it centralizes your data, so every team can rally and make these strategic decisions with one source of truth. I'd really encourage you to join in on our upcoming group demo session on February 29th. So you can scan a QR code to sign up, or follow the link in the chat. And now let me pop into some of these questions. All right, Ryan, I'm going to start throwing some of these your way.
Sure.
So first question, let's see. What tips and tricks can you share for ensuring a smooth learning curve and high adoption rate when you introduce a new road mapping tool to a product team?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that we did with the Dragonboat team was we sat down and had their folks help us kind of make sense of our chaos, right? It's walking us through, helping us set up our instances, getting the views right. They sat down and worked with our team to train us on those views across the leadership team, myself included. So don't underestimate the power of your provider to help you kind of get going as an accelerator, especially when you're putting in a new tool or you're a new CPO. Have them kind of walk you through what are the best views. They have a bunch of these different things, and if I'm hoping that you start off with a strong perspective on what your process is, but to a large degree, if you don't have a strong perspective on the process because the teams are relatively new or the teams have varying processes across the organization, let the team, the Dragonboat team, help you kind of lay out what a simple, easy framework would be as part of the implementation of the tool, and then standardize a little bit on process and a little bit on the tooling at the same time. So definitely focus on making sure that you work with the team, make sure you do the training, of course, but also focus on as little process as possible and let the tool kind of guide how you're going to be working as a team, to manage your overall portfolio management process, right? There's a ton of training you can get in this area. And in fact, I actually think you can overtrain in this area. And so when you're looking at, from what I mean by this area, you can overtrain in portfolio management. You can get too precise in how you try and manage a software portfolio. What you need are the high-level tools to make trade-offs, the ability to look at and deep dive into what you're working on a daily basis and manage that. And so the Dragonboat tool gives you most of that. You just need to align a little bit of your internal process around how that works and make sure you get buy-in across the organization as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And as part, very related to the conversation, as part of the evaluation process, can you share a little bit about how you evaluated other tools and what did ultimately make you land on Dragonboat?
Yeah. So I've had a long-standing relationship with Dragonboat. And so one of the first things I did when I came in the door, was tell my team that I was not going to be involved in the actual assessment of the tool. Right? I said we absolutely need something to be able to allow us, to manage our portfolio across our products and all of our different investments. And we needed something to visualize this. We needed to be able to, I set out my requirements of things that I needed across the board. My product strategy leader, because we're a small team, I actually don't have a separate product operations leader, took this on, and she drove the evaluation. I think we evaluated 7 different products, as part of this. And what kind of drove, well, we ended up with 2 or 3 different finalists. And once again, I was the step or so removed from this process because I didn't want to bias it. I wanted to make sure that the team chose the tool that was right for us and right for the organization. We settled on 2 or 3 different candidates, and in the end, the specific views and capabilities, along with the flexibility and the collaboration with the Dragonboat team, was really what won over the team as a whole. Right? They felt like they had a lot of flexibility to build what they needed, our specific process that we were working on as a leadership team, into the product. But not only that, the support from the Dragonboat team was top notch and gave them the ability to feel comfortable being able to kind of evolve our processes to align with a lot of the capabilities that we had in Dragonboat. So I was excited to see that they made the choice, and excited to start and get going with Dragonboat. I think this was 4 or 5 months ago. So
Yeah, super awesome to hear. So we are coming up on time, but I do want to wrap up with one final question today. So in summary of the talk and, based on your experience and observations, what future trends and road mapping tools should CPOs really be aware of?
yeah, well, that's a good one. I think that the overall what we're going to be focused on heavily, and you hear this all the time right now, is ROI, ROI, ROI. I think that the connection back to real ROI and the ability to show our thesis on what we believed we were going to be attaining by delivering certain features versus the actual execution of those features and feedback from our live systems that are measuring how people are using them is going to be key. Um, I think that also as I talk to CPOs and as I work with CPOs, the ability to take that focus on ROI and shift it up to the next level and talk about the value of the business, the ability to say, we are actually making an impact on the value of the business by investing in these specific areas and truly making this portfolio management a part of product management is key. We used to have the debate between product management and project management. That's pretty much dead. Product management is the thing, right? It includes a lot of project management, but product management is the skill set. But now we really need to bring in more portfolio management. If you want to get to that level of being a CPO, and you want to be able to work across an entire portfolio of products, you really need to have the skills aligned around how we bring in more of that portfolio management skill set into product management and grow from there. And so remember that unless you're working at this level, working across the portfolio, looking at strategies, initiatives, and so forth, you're only doing the product management side, and you want to grow your career to be much more of a balance between portfolio and product management.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we're a couple minutes over time, but thank you for staying on and answering just a couple more questions. Again, thank you so much all for joining our CPO series today. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. For the questions that we did not get to, we will find a way to follow up with you. But otherwise, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in today, and especially to Ryan for sharing all his amazing wisdom and learnings with us.
Thanks, everybody.